Hello friends, and once again, welcome to this weekly high with LHD show. This week we have Siddharth Pai, better known as Sid. He's a consultant, a writer, and investor in deep tech science. And Sid is also the founder of Siana Capital, has held senior executive roles at IBM, KPMG, and TPG ISG. He has advised and completed over $20 billion worth of deals till date. And that makes him an excellent resource out here to speak about the transition from the Trump regime to that of Joe Biden as the 46th president of the US and the impact on India's tech industry, whether it's H1-B, the deals, startups, etc. We will also discuss the implications of SEBI's approvals for the Reliance-Future deal on India's digital and e-commerce landscape. We'll talk about it a bit, and we'll talk a little more on the vaccine passports. At least that's what's proposed. And more importantly, we will be picking Sid's brains on how investors look at entrepreneurs who not only invest in the enterprise, whether it's cloud, SaaS companies, this thing, but also in cutting edge technologies like AI, IoT, blockchain, 3D printing, etc. So without much ado, Sid, let's open up this thing with you. You have seen this transition of the IT industry. I remember our conversation, like it's been over 2 decades kind of stuff, if I'm not mistaken. And we've been talking about so many technologies. So without much ado, what's happening? Is it a good thing? Is it that people should be leaping with joy as far as the transition from the Trump regime to Joe Biden? What are the implications?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me, Subbu and Leslie. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me try and address what you're talking about, which is directly this change of power going from one president to the other president in the United States. I think, by the way, not just the news media, but also a lot of the large companies make too much of what happens during an election and what happens during a handover. Interestingly, I mean, I'll give you a slightly long story, but this idea of H1 becoming a vehicle for people to move and work in the United States and be closer to their clients was not something that was on the horizon, say, 25 years ago. At that time, if you wanted to go to the US, you typically went there to study, got yourself a local degree, and then became employable and got into the H1 system and so forth. So the US government, under lobbying from a lot of the tech industry, decided that they would cut out that intermediate step of having to have a local degree and would provide H1s to people who were from other parts of the globe and had qualified in other parts of the globe. It can be useful for them. When they had a nursing shortage, for instance, they opened it up and brought in a large number of nurses from India, primarily Kerala, but also other parts of India. And nobody talks about that, but there was a lot of immigration that went on as far as that was concerned. The truth is, very little has changed in the laws. Whatever we may say about President Trump and his other, let's just call them weaknesses at this point in time, the one thing he understood really was that there were certain industries that were in need of talent, and certain industries where it wasn't a talent play, it was just an efficiency play where things were moving out from a manufacturing perspective. So in fact, one of the last things that he did when he was in office was to change some of the laws around the H1 visa to allow people who are on the H1 visa to get and had been in the US for a long time to get their green card sooner. I always say that it's not the policy, it's in the execution. And even during President Obama's time, I remember how the US consulates globally had been told, slow down on the Indian tech hires, again, because of intense lobbying by IBM and Accenture and others. And so if you went in and you asked for an H1 visa, you had the liability of getting rejected. possibility of you getting rejected was much higher. And it was selectively applied. I mean, whatever they may say, firms that were American but were hiring people in India, such as Accenture or IBM, had an easier time than an Infosys or a TCS or a Tech Mahindra, which are natively Indian. Though the policy was the same for both, it was executed differently for employees of different companies. It was also easy for the Microsofts or the Oracles and the others who are American companies who were here and had people here to get people over on such visas. So the main salient difference I want to point out over here is it is not a governmental or a person change. It is the policy implementation at the ground level and the instruction that's being given by the government, the executive government in charge, as to what to do with existing policy, which causes some of these blockages. Now, the world has changed. The H1 and the ability to go and work in America and so forth is much less of an issue now than it was several years ago. I'll explain why. In the beginning of the outsourcing revolution, the typical split between on-site resources, that is resources who are actually in America or in UK or anywhere else, and offshore resources, that is resources who are in India or in some other instances, the Philippines or places like that, was 30-70, which meant out of every 10 people, you had 3 people in the US who had to go to the US, travel to the US, and 7 people who are here. But over a period of time, what's happened due to a variety of factors. One, because of the pressure around H1s. 2, because of the automation of a lot of these functions. 3, because of the familiarity of corporations who are using these sorts of resources. That moved to 2080, and in today's deals is very often 1090 or even less, can even be 595. I've seen deals of that nature. So the impact where you need that many H1s for so many people traveling from India to the US has dropped considerably also from a macro perspective.
Is this also a COVID factor?
COVID has played a later role in what's going on. I think, COVID has bothered everybody, whether you got an H1 or you don't have an H1.
I'm saying the work from home, the ratio, the proportion of onshore versus offshore.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So the acceptability of the fact that work can be done from anywhere in the world certainly has gone up quite a bit. And so therefore, tech companies are more willing to parse out pieces of their work and say, okay, let this be done somewhere else. I don't care as long as it's some level of quality that I can accept when it comes back. It doesn't matter to me where it's done because of the nature of the business. And therefore, COVID certainly has accelerated that trend, which in many ways is a good thing. There's another trend I want to talk about, which I'll talk about later in the session, but that is the changing of the tech industry into a marketplace. Much like, everybody likes to say like Uberize the business, but much like Uber, where the need for the middleman has been removed. And I'll explain why that's happening as well. I don't want to take up all the airtime here, so I'll stop here because I'll answer that specific question about H1s. And then we'll talk about this marketplace and the IT industry as we go forward.
Yeah, because Subbu also had a very interesting perspective. We were talking about the same thing, that those with H1-B visas or those looking at probably a kind of a relaxation of rules should not, jump the gun because it's business. So, Subbu, we have shared this perspective on previous issues.
See, I think I broadly agree with what Siddharth is saying, that this trend of, the on-site to offshore, I remember when I was in the services business about 18 years ago, thereabouts, we used to talk about 35-65 to 25-75 and so on and so forth. Now there are cases where it is 595, 397, right? I know of a deal with a large major, it's a 397 deal. Now, therefore, the pressure on H1B is gone, okay? The other thing that we need to be careful about is that, it's got nothing to do with technology, but it has implications for us because, see, the minute Biden comes and starts rolling back, so to speak, it is not the issue of the actual impact on ground, but it is the optics. Okay, and the optics are very clear. The optics are that I'm going to be more friendly to you as against the earlier guy who was less friendly to you, right? Now, whilst this may work for us, and we may start jumping immediately, the problem with at the geopolitical level is that this is exactly the kind of being too politically correct which lost them and which brought in Trump.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we need to be tempered in our reaction. We need to kind of say, all right, what is the real impact on ground? Okay, the real impact on ground is going to be marginal at best.
Absolutely.
No? And your point about COVID, see, COVID just accelerated the process. I mean, it was already down to 1090
Correct.
broadly. Okay, so it just accelerated the process, and that is all there is to it. I don't think there is any major, India friendly or H1-B friendly activity that has been done by the new administration.
Yeah, and I also feel a lot of the discussion does a disservice to the way the IT industry has matured. Because over a period of time, if you see their business partners today to a very great extent, it's just not about outsourcing or offshoring or kind of stuff. Those may bring down costs, and that is very good for the multinationals also. But at the same time, you clearly see that there has been a real maturity curve. Sid will clearly has seen that maturity curve grow about it, and we have spoken about this at length. So here I find that from a perception point of view, also it does a major disservice to companies that are actually doing a lot more work in partnership with these companies. Yeah. I think they have created offshore employment for these companies. And I think this will be important to also relay this because, as you said, we should temper the expectations and probably project this that no, over a period of time, Indian IT companies actually offer a lot more value to the business. So I
see
think
the body shopping as a business, okay, is almost at its extinction, at its death throes.
Yeah, but the perception still exists. That's the problem.
You see, and that is exactly why I'm saying that, the minute you start jumping and saying that, hallelujah, your H1-B is back, then the narrative that goes along with that is okay. So which means we are going to get more people out here.
Exactly.
And the second thing I personally I have experienced what the policy is and what the implementation is. And these are two different things. I mean, I can tell you that, circa 2018, when I was traveling back from Toronto into United States, okay, at the border immigration, I was asked, I said, the guy said, what do you do? I said, I'm a journalist, and I tech journalist. He didn't understand. He said, oh, you've also come to take away our jobs. I said, wow, I mean, I'd like to, but the fact is, I'm not. And he held me there for 15 minutes. Okay.
That was a short time, believe me.
No. But this was a bus ride. Okay. I was just trying to bus it back from Toronto, and everybody had gone. I was all alone. Okay. Now, the thing is, it is the way you implement it, and how you implement it is also a function of the narrative that goes along with, the perception that gets built up. That, everything is going to get opened up, and the Democrats are going to now open up more and more people are going to come in and take away our jobs. That's just not true. It doesn't work anymore.
So
companies hire because they need.
So Sid and Subbu both, I think what is also important at this point in time is perhaps industry bodies like NASSCOM, which take this thing, probably need to change the narrative out here. Media companies also need to change the narrative out here or understand the narrative better, probably.
See, the thing that I agree completely. I mean, this is a tired analogy, but I've been using it for a long time. You see this backlash, so to speak, against a foreign country that comes in the mind of the middle American. I'm not talking about necessarily what it's at the policy level or anything else. The only ones who have actually handled it with panache are the Japanese. And I'll explain why. In the late 70s, early 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s, if you remember, which is when the Japanese automobile revolution had started. And it got to a point where people at Chrysler and, General Motors and Ford and other places were losing their jobs. And you would have signs and placards put up, in open parking lots, definitely in the parking lots of these larger companies saying, please don't park your import here. Right? So the then the Japanese got it. What they started doing was setting up small plants in the US, and then a little thing on the side of the car which you were going to buy, which would say things like 40% local content, 70% local content, and so on and so forth. And after a little while, after about a decade, said, made with pride in the United States of America. Now, the fact that the car was designed elsewhere, the fact that almost all the mechanics came from elsewhere, the fact that all that, but didn't matter because at the end of the day, the last assembly of maybe the last door handle, of course, they also put some money in plants. But they got to a point where this mindset of the middle American was that, oh, Honda is as American as a Ford. So what I'm buying is an American car and it's supporting American jobs and labor. The Japanese are the ones who got that. And interestingly, the Chinese and the Indians have not been able to get that.
But Sid, having said that, isn't this exactly what this Atmanirbhar is all about? I mean, you are building phones, but everything is coming from outside.
Exactly.
Right.
It's
You are
completely...
building phones, you're building, whatever equipment you're building, everything is coming from outside.
Right.
You're putting it together and you're saying proudly made in India. Right?
It's managing perception.
Exactly. It's just a matter of managing perception. And I think to be fair to a lot of IT companies, I think by themselves, many of them have started or had started doing it some time ago. I know Infosys has a large campus. I know TCS has got a very large camp. They have several large campuses, right? I know I could get into serious trouble for saying this, but I don't know how effective anything like NASSCOM is going to be. Because I mean, listen, they are an industry body in India. Okay, they are not a CII.
Correct.
Right. So for them to go to the US and then lobby consistently over a period of time, they may have the money. I'm not questioning that. I'm sure the industry will give them the money. But are they going to be taken seriously by the administration? I'm not sure about that.
No, not
sure.
Not really. I think it's, to me, I've got lots of friends in NASSCOM, so I have to be careful when I say this. But nonetheless, I think that it's a body that's outlived its usefulness.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll explain why, because I think there are two or three things. I mean, it's okay within the context of Indian IT companies working with one another. For instance, we now have a surge again in the number of entry-level people who are being employed. So they're jumping from one job to another with 70% and 100% pay raises, which they don't deserve, simply because there's a vacuum right now, and companies are willing to splurge and bring them on. But that's an internal thing that NASSCOM can help us manage here in India. See, the days of 25, 30 years ago, when people didn't understand what Indian software was, and there was really small companies, having an association like NASSCOM made a lot of sense, because their power could be lobbied together or put together, and lobbies could be set up in the US to change people's thought process, all the way through, I would say, Kiran Karnik's time, when he was the chairman.
Devang Mehta, Kiran Karnik.
Right. And Devang did a phenomenal job just before Kiran.
Absolutely.
And that was a time when it was really useful and required for Indian industry. Today, I would say, from a lobbying perspective, it should be the TCSs, the Infosys, they are cognizant. Why are they not spending their own lobbying money?
No, you're right. I mean, look at it this way. If I'm a senator, would I respond to a Tata or would I respond to a NASSCOM?
Correct.
I think it's not rocket science. Okay.
Not at all.
So I think you're right. I think the mandate itself has to undergo a change.
Yes.
Well, then,
Yeah,
like I said, I'm not sure whether
yeah,
NASSCOM.
exactly. I mean, we shall now just drop that topic because NASSCOM needs to introspect. And as I said, like we all have friends in NASSCOM, and in personal discussions, yes, it's not that this is the first time that we have been so outspoken about things. Like, yeah, people have been critical about NASSCOM, but I think to be fair, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this entire thing, but NASSCOM has tried to move into digital initiatives, digital transformations, giving a lot more face to the IT industry by holding events and calling, global speakers. So that thing, but probably that perception issue as far as the H1-B is there clearly needs to be tackled.
Correct.
But that said, let's segue into the other part of it. Sid, you have done, as I said earlier also, over $20 billion worth of deals in terms of value. Now, as I think Subbu also will agree, we would love to hear your thoughts on how entrepreneurs or what do investors look at when they look at these companies, whether it's the tech enterprise companies, cloud, SaaS based, or whatever it be, and whether cutting edge companies, whether it's AI, 3D printing, blockchain, IoT,
Sure.
etc.
I have another question for Sid.
Yes.
And this is something that's been, kind of playing in my head for several years now. Why is it that, when we have enterprise companies in India, the banks and the insurance companies and the manufacturing companies who implemented fairly sophisticated technology solutions, why is it that the CTOs and CIOs of those companies don't want to become entrepreneurs? Is it that you don't want them, you will not fund them, or is it that there is some gap between what they have done and what you would like them to do? Because this is a strange issue. They
So
know technology.
you can take it in two parts.
Yeah, so I'll take it in two parts. So let me answer, I think, Subbu's question first, Leslie, and I'll get back to yours because yours is a little bit more general. Before I lose the specificity of what he's asking about. See, Subbu, I don't think it's a question of just I think what happens with CTOs is they've come to a level where they are probably not as risk-seeking in their careers as.
Is it only me or Sid is not audible to?
Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying that I think CTOs have come to a point in their careers where they've elevated enough in the enterprise and have gotten used to large salaries. So they're not as risk seeking as younger people within the organization. And I have seen several startups from Indian IT, Indian firms and people within the Indian IT firms. So there will be 2 or 3 rungs down from the CTO. But they are the guys who have been implementing these ideas. They're the guys who have been coming up with these new ideas. And for instance, there's one firm that we're looking at right now where founders have never worked outside of India. They've only worked on tech in India and with Indian entities, and one or two cases with the R&D units of non-Indian, in this case, Korean entities. And they're at a stage in their careers where they're willing to take that risk. So we see a lot of those sorts of people. We do see people coming in from the Indian IT ecosystem. And it's actually important. And I'll tell you why it's important to an investor like me. Because somebody developing something outside of the context of how it's going to be used here in India is of no value. I don't care if the tech is the deepest possible tech. I don't care if it's based on the greatest blockchain technology out there. In fact, there's something now which is sitting on both ends of the blockchain, which says we don't know how, it doesn't really matter how it functions on the inside, but we will track who the originator and who the recipient of the transaction is. I mean, who these two people are, which of course is of value to governmental agencies and other people, especially if there's any crime going on in that spot. But it's not, I mean, it's sitting somewhere and it's being managed in the US, and it's been, the application itself of this will start being in several other countries before it's applicable to India. Whereas these other founders whom I just spoke about, they are sitting here right now working on cutting edge natural language processing Indian languages. Many people say, oh, you can use Google Translate. No, you can't use Google Translate.
No, you can't. You can't use it.
And you need actual speech to text engines. As I'm speaking to you, let us say I switch to Malayalam, or I switch to Tamil, or I switch to Konkani, or I switch to Hindi, or whatever, Kannada. The switch that goes on is to a point where the context and everything else changes completely. And you, as you well know, you are students of language. Where we place the subject and where we place the object is
Predicate, yeah.
The predicate is just is almost irrelevant in many Indian languages. You know by the formation of the verb what people are actually referring to, and which is not something that's there necessarily in Western language at all. And so therefore, being able to get around things like this is the simplistic thing that I spoke about, because it can be coded in. But then these guys, whom I will not name them, but have gone actually one step further. They figured that a lot of the grammar of many of the Indian languages has evolved from Sanskrit grammar.
That's right.
Except Tamil, which is a different language entirely. And also, this business of singular, dual, and then plural. And then the fact that to make it simpler, the dual bit was cut out and it's just singular and plural. So if you start with that as an etymology and you start with that as a tree, that helps you with most Indian languages. Obviously, you need to treat Tamil differently. You need to treat some of our northeastern languages differently. But they've got that too, and they've understood that too. It'll be a long time before a Western firm says, okay, I can come in and have something that will manage 30, 40, 50, 60 Indian languages. It's only going to happen with people here who are local. The second example I have is a firm that we've actually invested in, two firms that we've invested in. I won't name them again. One is an agronomy startup, and they are trying to help farmers with small holdings decide what next harvest to do, partially based on the market, but more based upon science that says, listen, if you plant potato now, you will have blight. So don't do that, circulate it, put something else in. Or it comes to a point where the farmer has already planted whatever it is he or she wants to plant, and it comes to where they take a look at the leaf and say, oh my God, this is going somewhere. Now they can, again using agronomy, very quickly decide that this is disease A or disease B and provide the right pesticide based upon what's going on, rather than the farmer going trial and error. Okay, which is just taking agronomy thinking and scientific thinking down to the small holding level. Obviously, where you monetize that is not with the poor farmer because he doesn't have anything to pay. You monetize that with the pesticide firms or the
Sid,
firms.
I'd like to butt in here. In the interest of time, basically, if you were to give like 3 lessons that entrepreneurs could derive from the kind of experiences that you have, as I think you have already pointed it out, but if you can be specific, because people would like these, like they love it in 2 or 3 lines, in a sense, like, okay, fine, develop products and solutions for the Indian market, those kind of things.
Okay, so I think 3 or 4 things. First and foremost, I think there is a large untapped burgeoning market in India, which has now been freed by the fact that we have broadband access pretty much everywhere. That I think is pretty evident to people. So focusing in India says just my point is there is a long tail. There is no need for you to go and look for stuff outside of our country. The second thing is within that, very often, the specific thing that you need to be focusing on is no longer the B2C component. And I think that's where many people are making a mistake. They think that, the easy money is to be made in the B2Cs because that's the last phase. The guys, the Flipkarts, the Zomatos, the Swiggies and so forth. That's not where the money is to be made anymore. The money is to be made in the enterprise to enterprise sale, as brought out earlier. And so therefore you need to find out what's important to the Indian enterprise for it to reach its customers, because they've already been here for, decades and they know how to get to their customers. So you need to figure out what's important to the enterprise. So that's the second thing that I would suggest. And the third thing I would suggest is don't try and beat the Israelis or the Chinese or the Americans at whatever they're trying to do from a tech game perspective. Use them, but use them with the applicability of a specific thing for India that makes sense for India. So and the fourth and the last thing is, don't necessarily think that if you build an idea, the world is going to beat a path to your door. It's not going to happen. You need to understand the specific problems and the specific business issues that each one of these companies is having. If you can solve that, then you're really in business. And don't go after fads. Okay, today is learning environment, tomorrow, just hold on, think 5 years out, COVID will be gone. And that's when your company will need the significant growth to bring in, more investors, higher valuation, and so forth. Why are you reacting to what is probably going to be just an 18-month window of problems? Don't overdo it.
In that particular context, anything specific for the cutting edge guys, because they tend to follow fads, and I think Subbu and me, we have discussed on the past shows also that these cutting edge reach a hype cycle, then they go down, and I think you know that better than us.
Yeah. So the cutting edge guys, again, I will say, focus on the things that will really make an impact. Definitely, natural language processing will make an impact here in India. The second thing that's going to make an impact in India is enterprise-specific IoT.
Right.
So if I'm Tata Steel or I'm Tata Motors, and I'm getting stuff from a variety of places, or I have cars all over the country or trucks all over the country, then if there's some specific things that you can do, as in, say, take my tankers and have them digitally managed so that there is no spillage and or loss of, say, fuel or milk or whatever else gets siphoned off on the way. Those are the types of business problems that the cutting edge guys need to focus on, because there are blockchain applications for things like that. There are IoT applications for things like that. Please come up with those. One which we've seen that has done really well, in fact, is an IoT application to manage engines that are already in the field. Small little thing out there, it's a retrofit, but now the health of that engine can be centrally managed without you having to send out an engineer every 3 months or 2 months, which is not in our psyche also, because once you've installed it, you only call the engineer once the thing is broken down. You don't want preventive maintenance. But if this can be pushed into the ecosystem, that's where I would suggest they focus on.
So now let's segue into the other part of it, which we were promised our viewers that we would talk about, is the SEBI's approval for the Reliance-Future deal, what it means for the digital and the e-commerce landscape. Subbu, your quick thoughts on that? Subbu, can you hear us?
So I think, so SEBI approval has come with a significant amount of riders. Okay. And SEBI has in fact told Future that they have to inform, that they have to mention that there is a pending, litigious situation that is possible. And they have to disclose all of this stuff. That apart, I think what we are really seeing is some sort of a consolidation. I think it is a 1-2 market that we are heading towards, and it's fairly apparent now. Yes, there will be other players, but they will be niche players. The two 700-pound gorillas will be Reliance and Amazon. And Amazon knows that. And which is the reason why Amazon is, trying to expedite the arbitration process in Singapore and try and get a decision out. Reliance, on the other hand, of course, is moving its own muzzle. It requires Future because especially for growing into the DC, BC towns. So it'll be interesting. The only issue that I'm a little concerned about is that in any 1-2 market, initially the consumer benefits a lot. But later on, the consumer starts paying more.
The DTH is an excellent example.
DTH, and look at your food delivery today. Your food delivery, the other day I just realized that the cost of a McDonald's meal, right, is 2x on Swiggy. as compared to the list price. It's 2x, 100%. Okay. Now, maybe because of behavioral issues, we are all getting used to, hooked on to Swiggy's and the Zomatos of the world, and I had nothing wrong with them. That's their business model. But the 1-2 market typically does this.
Yes.
So I am a little wary of that. But having said that, well, there's nothing much I can do unless I decide to buy Amazon or Reliance out. I mean, really.
Sid, your quick thoughts?
No, I agree with that. I think it is going to be the dance of the gorillas. But I think there is, and at the end of the day, I think, as Subbu pointed out, in the long run, the consumer is the loser. But set that aside for now, I think, because there is an opportunity there. And the opportunity there is very interesting. And it's not for the consumer as much as it is for, don't forget, it's a marketplace. So you have people also selling on Amazon, the opportunity really is on the other end for the smaller players, and not the kirana stores and all that they make much of in the media. But from a technology perspective, the answer is to build India's version of Shopify. Now, if you're aware of Shopify, all it does is it provides an e-commerce platform for an existing small mom and pop business. So I might be an electronics retailer on the corner of the street. I might be a hosiery seller. I might be something else. And if I'm put on Amazon, you squeeze everything out. And if I come up with something that's a worthwhile product, you can be sure there'll be an Amazon Basics equivalent at half the price tomorrow, right? Which is hurting the seller also. But if I can go on a Shopify, that doesn't happen.
That's the ecosystem that you're building.
I'm building an ecosystem. So that's why Shopify is doing as well as it's doing in the United States and in other parts of the globe that is beginning to open up. I definitely think if an entrepreneur were to think of this seriously and build something from that perspective. See, India is a very entrepreneurial country in terms of mom and pop stores, small shops, small stores, specialist furniture makers, you name it. And if I can then provide each one of them a platform where they know, listen, this guy is not cash register, maker, everything, and competitor at the same time, then it's much more helpful. I think that vacuum will be filled. Probably not immediately, but I think within 18 months to 24 months, I think somebody will have the sense to fill that vacuum when they see these two players.
I like that. I like that expression. Dancing with the gorillas. In that context, do you know this? Where can an 800-pound gorilla sleep? Anywhere it likes. So with that, let's take on to the last topic that we wanted to talk about, the vaccine passports. Now, we know that I think there are three countries. It's Estonia, Hungary, and one more, Iceland, I think. So,
Iceland, yeah.
Yeah. So these three countries are already thinking about the vaccine card, basically, which is similar to what the World Health Organization has, the yellow card kind of stuff. Of course, this will be a more sophisticated digital certification kind of issue. I think I have just two concerns out here. One is that the efficacy of the vaccines have not been proven up. So how do you really come up with this kind of a thing? And second, I think also the shortage of the drugs has not been addressed, because there are many companies. I think Pfizer has had a problem, AstraZeneca has a problem, and so we have these issues out here. So probably the sense, I think even WHO has spoken against rushing with this vaccine passport concept out here. So let's have your quick thoughts on this. Either one of you.
So to me, see, we like to come up with terminologies. We love our terminologies. Many years ago, I remember, if you had to go to the US or the United Kingdom, you required a yellow fever shot. The certificate had to be shown.
The yellow card.
Okay. So all that's going to happen is that you're going to replace a card with a chip or a QR code, right? That having said, we don't know what is the case for reinfection.
Yes.
So far from this being your passport into Iceland, this could actually be your, your route into creating new swath, new wave in Iceland for COVID. We don't know that animal. We don't know COVID. We don't know vaccine. We don't know reinfection. We don't know efficacy. So what are we trying to rush into for?
Yeah.
You know, that is what is bothering me about this whole COVID, this vaccine passport issue.
Sid, you?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think it's too early. I mean, all we can really do at this point in time is, okay, are you COVID negative, COVID positive before you board that flight, which is being done. And I think, until we know what the true efficacy of the vaccines are, which the data will now come out, over a period of time as it's all being tightly managed. Even here in India, it's impossible. I mean, here it's very clear. It's for frontline medical workers, defense personnel. Those are the people who are getting it. And I've heard stories where people, they arrive with just the exact number of vials and they leave with that, right? So, but the data will be clean, is what I think. And once the data is gets established, I think it'll take at least 18 to 24 months. Once the data gets established, then maybe, having something that says, okay, I've got a COVID certificate, I'm free of it, or I've been vaccinated. I think that's the time. Right now, as Subbu says, we know very little. We know very little about the efficacy of the vaccine, the disease itself, whether it can reestablish itself in some other form. So I think we'll have to probably go back to a little bit more of our regular and normal things.
Last night, Boris Johnson said that the UK strain is going to be far more deadly, deadlier, right? Now, is this vaccine going to prevent that? We don't know. The other thing that the other thing that is, I was finding it very interesting was, so what happens when you develop, herd immunity? So let's say you reach 70%, you develop herd immunity, which means 70% of your population is vaccinated. Yes. Now, the rule is that you cannot travel if you are not vaccinated. So, which means 30% of the people are never ever going to be they'll never ever be able to travel because they don't need to be vaccinated.
Correct.
So, I mean, you're dividing society. Basically, that's a big problem out here because the lack of, and even India has its own COVIN, which is the COVID Vaccine Intelligence Network. So it's not that we are not trying that. And of course, connecting the dots here. I think we all are on the same page that it's a little premature, and it's not only us; it's basically many experts are thinking about that. It's very surprising. So all the Western media also now are coming up with these. Initially, they hailed this kind of proposal, and now they're coming up with all kind of caveats. World Health Organization also has stood up about it. So yeah, it's.
See, the inoculation movement is not something that is going to get over anytime soon. So I think to that extent, talking about a vaccine passport at this level, at this point in time, I think it's way too premature. Way too premature.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So Sid, lovely having you on the show. Thank you for your insights. I mean, and also that history about the outsourcing, which many of our viewers will not be knowing. So I'm glad that you came up. And I think the tips that you provided are very specific, pointed, and I think a lot of take-homes. So viewers, I hope you had a good time.
Just one thing I want to mention. Yes. Sid, I think both of us should avoid the NASSCOM offices for the next few weeks, because, I think there could be some. If you have an H1-B visa, you'll get it cancelled. If you don't have it, you'll not be issued one.
There you go.
I think people in NASSCOM also are pretty introspective. They are thinking about a lot of these issues. So I think they'll be gracious enough to overlook some of the peccadillos. And since we're all the
go ahead.
No, they say nobody kicks a dead horse here, so it's okay.
It's not exactly. So it's.
And I think they're all brethren, the same brethren, so we have a right to voice our opinion out here. And they're free to disagree, so that's okay.
Yeah, of course, I mean, everybody has their opinion, right? So it's,
absolutely.
I had a little bit of a run-in. Sorry, I had a little bit of a run-in about 18 months ago with NASSCOM. Actually, when I found out that Sajid Chinoy, who was the chief economist of KP Morgan, had figured that there was no movement in the balance of actual cash balances moving in the IT industry in terms of amount of foreign exchange being earned. Whereas Every year we were saying, oh, it's going to grow by 20%, it's going to grow by 40%, it's going to grow by 15%, and so forth. The NASSCOM number was very, very important. Well, it turns out that that NASSCOM number was actually something that was back engineered with a lot of extrapolation. So I wrote a piece about that, and I got a couple of calls
So
from.
you're a marked man already. Good.
That's the word. And just basically saying that these numbers are just not something we can rely on. So I got a couple of calls and had a couple of meetings, and then of course they went and explained their side of the story. But I'll just say that they've, for what it's worth, they've stopped providing guidance on growth.
No, but in all fairness, I will be calling some NASSCOM executives on the show also, and hopefully we can have you back because I think they need their voice to be heard, and as I said, it's a healthy debate is always warranted out here.
Startups with the local industry, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So let's give the devil its due. And on that note, viewers.
So you're also a marked man now. You just called NASSCOM a devil.
Well. I love the way you give a twist. This is what AI can't do at this point in time. So I know you're not an algorithm. So viewers, I hope you had an excellent time because we can talk about this topic as usual till the cows come home. But for now, we will take your leave. Enjoy your weekend and do subscribe and like this channel. And if you want to participate, any experts watching the show, you want to be part of the show, just drop us a line. So bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sid. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.